Hey guys, this is Dr. Shannon Crawford with 7M Culture, which represents the 7 mountains or spheres of influence that most greatly influence how a society functions. Whether you realize it or not, you are an influencer. It could be at a micro level in your home, if you have roommates in college, or you have family and children and a spouse, or if you live in an apartment complex and you have neighbors. It could be in your workplace, if you're a solopreneur and how you treat your customers. If you're a boss, a manager, a person in a corporation, how do you engage others? What does your colleague relationship look like? How do you lead up and how do you lead down in a way that's life-giving versus kind of punching the clock and just getting through the day? The big emphasis I want you to get out of following this channel is that you recognize each of those small mundane moments that could just drift by and start recognizing the power, the beauty, the anointing that can come on you when everything else is falling apart, when it's a Groundhog Day and it doesn't seem like God's inviting you into something. That may be the very moment that you could just pray under your breath, hey God, what are you saying about this person right now? I have worked with many clients who really struggle in their workplace environment because whether we realize it consciously or not, our template for how we do relationships does come from our family of origin. And in our workplace, as much as our family life, it does come from a template from our childhood family of origin and how our family was run. Were our authority figures benevolent? Were they kind? Did they advocate for us? Or were they cold, distant, and said, you'll do it because I said so? Did they emotionally engage you? Or were they just kind of absent, empty shells of people kind of living in the same house? So when I work with people as a leadership consultant, helping clients recognize where are you starting to project onto your leadership, onto your colleagues, your peers, and those that are your subordinates, where are some of those dynamics from your past starting to get replicated? Now, that's not to say that it's made up. It's not to say that it's all just in your mind and nobody's against you. There can be lots of funky dynamics in a workplace because it replicates our family of origin, but it also represents theirs. And so we all kind of bump up against each other with all of our issues. And my encouragement to you is recognizing when it's happening and how to get unhooked from those dynamics. They can become very toxic, especially when you perceive others as being against you. If you feel like you're not safe, you're not represented, you're not advocated for, and you feel like your leadership is favoring someone else over you, you will take on a victim mindset. And before you know it, you will start sending out vibes that say, I am not into you, I don't feel safe around you, you're not good. And what that does is it puts up all your walls and your defenses. It overly activates your amygdala, so you're not going to be as clear and sharp in doing your profession or leading your meeting or doing your presentation, your innovation. Secondly, it's also going to send out vibes to the world that they're like, oh, this person's not into communicating or connecting, or they think they're better than us, isn't often a feeling that the other side will be having from interacting with you. And not that that's your heart at all. Many times we see ourselves as the one who is being done wrong, instead of realizing, what am I doing that might be sending out vibes that's activating their shame, their inadequacy. If you have a manager or a boss who is really difficult, sometimes you may be a part of that. Not always by any means, but you might be sending out vibes like, you're not going to take advantage of me, you're not going to exploit me, you're not going to make me work extra hours. And while it's true that you need to have good boundaries, you may be sending out what's called a hook. And it's getting people to hook into a dynamic at an unconscious, implicit level that neither you nor the other person realizes happening. And so they're starting to respond to you like you think that they're this person, and then they're standing up for themselves at an unconscious level and feeling undermined and devalued and disrespected. And so people overcompensate. And so they kind of bow up around you, and then they do become more assertive, and they do. And so it proves the very thing that we believed in our heart, that the very thing we feared came upon us, but we were part of creating the self-fulfilling prophecy. So in order to climb the mountain of influence, one of the things we have to master is how are we relating with those in our sphere of influence? If you're in a work situation and you find yourself ruminating about how that guy in the other cubicle and blah, 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 or that manager's not listening, or this subordinate who should be doing their work and they're not, if you're doing that, you are no longer relating with that person in the present. You are relating with them through a filter of your past relationships, your past experiences, because remember, we can't put reality in the organ of the brain. I only have filters going through our limbic system. And so everything from our past experience and our emotional brain filter how I perceive people. And when I start getting that hamster wheel where I'm like, oh, and I think about it a lot, and I'm not going to let that in this place, and I just need to leave here and blah, blah. When you start doing that, you need to know several things are happening. One, amygdala, which is fear and aggression center of the brain. Everything is sitting on that emotional brain when you're thinking like that. That's that kind of emotional reactive energy that's being wasted and siphoned, pulling, hijacking away from your prefrontal. This is the part that you need to be excellent in order to be promoted, in order to lead well, in order to be a visionary and a futuristic and can delegate and be strategic. You need this part of your brain. In order to be emotionally available and present with your team, that they feel safe and they respect your leadership and they want to follow you, you need to get out of this emotional brain. It will undermine you, it will undermine your influence, and it will undermine them because they're getting hooked into this weird dynamic that you don't know you're creating because of your old narrative of feeling like a victim, feeling taken advantage of. I'm not going to take it. I'm not going to be a rug anymore. People aren't going to walk all over me. And when you stay in that place, you are sabotaging yourself. You're also capping the level that God can trust you at. Your brain, that limbic system, the emotional brain, will create a glass ceiling that inhibits growth past a certain point, because there are things the Lord is going to ask you to do, like a Joseph, where you may need to forgive people who have wronged you. And if you can't forgive and you can't release Joe in the other cubicle, or Mary Lou who has treated you wrong, or Keisha or Samuel or whomever, if you can't do that at a work setting, how much more you're not going to be able to handle the trials at a higher level on that mountain. Because when you're climbing a mountain of culture, there are occupying strongholds that just cause everybody to kind of fall under that. When you're climbing up that mountain, that means you need to be able to say, hey, God, I surrender this offense. Everything inside of me right now feels like the whole team is against me, that my boss is choosing someone else over me, that they're favoring their hours or their projects. I'm always being overlooked. I choose not to agree with that narrative. I choose not to see myself as a victim. I choose to see myself as a leader. And right now I will serve in the hidden place, even if they're not promoting me. God, I'm working as unto you, and you will promote me. When you have that heart and that intention, you're passing tests, and you can now be trusted in higher spheres of that mountain. When you cannot, no big deal. You just don't go further. You get plateaued, and everything kind of stays stuck back here. And it feels like there's this frustrating force against you. And it's like, oh, man, why me? Look at, and it's hard not to envy. Everybody else is moving forward. Why am I not moving forward? Because there may be some character issues in you. You may be carrying some kind of inadequacy, fear, victim, shame, pride, arrogance, haughtiness, rebellion to authority. There may be something in you that is creating a glass ceiling that's inhibiting your progression to be able to pass the test in order to go to that next level. Your past experience is your hippocampus. Your amygdala is the fear and aggression. Your thalamus, the relay station that constructs your version of reality, is all sitting on the emotional brain, deep inside the organ of your brain. We are not objective. We are not clear. If we put up 5 people who saw the same crime, there would be 5 different versions of reality, because things are just not objective. And as a leadership consultant who wants to see healthy, godly leaders emerge and lead in every sphere of society, it is incumbent upon me to help you recognize the narrative you've believed your whole life may be the very glass ceiling that is creating the frustration and the tension that's holding you back from being able to flourish. It's hard to look at ourselves. It's hard for me to look at myself and recognize, man, I have a lot of I have a lot of blind spots. I think it's actually gray. I have a lot of blind spots that I need to work on. And instead of focusing on what everybody else needs to do and what they need to change, not that they don't, not that that's not reality. I'm not Pollyanna thinking that everything is perfect and it's all you. Ooh, it's these. But what I am saying, excuse me, is that you are responsible for you. And irrespective of what they do, kind of like Daniel, all the people did conspire against him in his workplace. That was real. That's not his imagination. And he didn't hook that environment. They literally were jealous of the favor on his life. And they really did want to sabotage his career. They actually wanted to kill him, but I'm trying to use business terms so that we can relate in modern day. So they really did set a trap to try to undermine his authority and his influence in his corporation, i.e. government. And so that's a real situation. But Daniel didn't waste time ruminating on how they're doing him wrong and God, you deal with them and blah, 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 right? That would have undermined his ability to do his job and to be wise and discerning and effective in his sphere of influence. Rather, he went back and he did the very thing that had gotten him to the place of success. He went back to his prayer closet. There are things that in the corporate world you may need to say, okay, I won't do that here. And then there's things that are non-negotiables that you will not compromise on. And you need to decide those ahead of time before the testing. Do I love the approval of man, the acceptance, the applause of man more than I love the fear of God, the applause of God, that heaven is cheering me on, that the great cloud of witnesses are saying, lay off every weight that easily entangles and run up that mountain. You've got it. Because those are big tests for all of us. Do I love the approval of man? If he did, Daniel would have stopped praying. And he would have been accepted and everything would have been fine, but there would have been a glass ceiling on his level of influence. If instead you choose your battle, not foolishly, there's some things in a corporate setting you should not do, but if you choose your battle wisely, and you know the stakes, and you say, God, even if I still choose to obey you more than the approval of man. I'm not going to ruminate. I'm not going to go into a victim narrative. I'm not going to spend my time wasting focus on what they're doing. I'm going to decide who I am, and I'm going to be the kind of leader that lives on the top of the mountain and not the one that's kind of middle management or middle corporate level or political level. I'm not going to live like I'm here. I'm going to already start preparing to live at the highest sphere of leadership. Daniel, because he didn't do all this noise, he decided who he was. That kept him sharp in his prefrontal cortex. Secondly, he engaged his spirit man over his soul. To do that is really hard, especially when you are being wronged. But to do that is to forgive, to release, to let God be your advocate in your justice. And when the testing and when the trial came, the Lord closed the mouth of the lion. So in our terms, there's probably not real lions in our corporate settings. Otherwise, HR needs a good call. But what it could be is you may not get that job selection or that subcontract, or you may not be promoted for that position. When that trial comes and you continue to serve with a good attitude and you continue to do the right thing, Daniel was promoted and he was able to continue to give wise counsel to the king, while all those people who set him up, they were thrown to the lions, and it was real rough on their career. If we just do the career analogy, it was real rough on their lives, but it was rough on their career as well. And then Daniel was able to help influence the leader of the day, of the then known world, was influenced by the man who would not compromise on his key principles. That's hard to do. I pray that I can do that. I'm not saying I've mastered any of it, but I do want to prepare you for those tests that in the corporate setting, in the government setting, in the media, when they're giving you an assignment that your conscience is feeling conflicted and you don't feel peace. There is anxiety and distress and frustration about the assignment because you know in your gut you don't agree with it. If there's a role that you're being cast for in a creative setting and your spirit is going, this is not it, this is not it, but that soul wants it so bad. You want that promotion, you want that role, you want that job so bad. Those are those critical moments that you're being tested. Will you stay at this place and get minimal success? Get that little perk up. It feels good initially, but there is a glass ceiling over your life. Or will you allow that testing and to stay faithful to your convictions? Will you forgive those who don't deserve it? Will you change the narrative that's in your mind that they're not against you, that your fight is not against flesh and blood, but spirits, powers, and principalities, that these people genuinely probably don't actually care about you, but there is an attack against you going up your mountain? So if you recognize that, then it's really easy to love the person. It's really easy to forgive them because you know they're just a puppet to what the enemy is doing, and it's resistance training. Just like if you were doing a marathon, you have to do some resistance training, so then it gets really easy and you can excel. A lot of times athletes will overtrain and then they'll put weights on and sweats and different things that kind of weigh them down so that when they're in the actual moment, they are streamlined, they're efficient, the muscles are built up. In the career version of reality, that would be that overtraining in character response. What do I allow to occupy my mind? Do I allow myself to get offended? Do I allow myself to stay in a negative narrative? Do I allow myself to take jobs, roles, and positions that compromise my values? Or do I say, God, I am willing to forgive this person. I am willing to say that their heart is good and that this is just a rough moment and the enemy is trying to bring confusion. I bless them. I'm going to serve this difficult boss that maybe is asking me to do extra hours or just arduous things, because I trust, God, that you're the one who promotes me. You're the one who lifts my head. You're the one who makes room for my gift, not man. The Lord's testing you, not in a mean way, but just to see through the perseverance. Are you ready? Are you mature and complete to go on to that next phase of the mountain? And it will often look opposite, right? Like somebody else will take the job that you're like, that nude scene, I wasn't going to do it, but they did it. Now they're super famous and they got the next job that I really dreamt of. That is not the same kind of success in the kingdom. There may be a season of regression where it's almost like you feel like you're going backwards. But if you see it like David's slingshot, then God can promote you way further than any man could. Because in this world, they are fickle. And you are not actually loved for you as a being. You are loved for a commodity, for a service, for what you can do, a pretty face, a nice body, something that you can produce, an innovation, a creative marketing scheme. They love you for what you produce, not for who you are. While in heaven, you have a Father who loves who you are. He loves you. He loves you when you wake up with bad breath. He loves you with no makeup. He loves you when you haven't been to the gym. He loves you in your corporate setting. He loves you in your artistic setting. He loves you, and he's not going to dry you up and use you up. So in my next video, I'm going to talk more about that. But for this one, I want to focus on making sure you take your thoughts captive. Make sure you're regulating the narrative you're allowing your brain to go down and redirecting it toward a positive hook, that you can be delightful and engaging and whimsical in a way that lowers people's guards and can hook them into a positive, playful dynamic instead of a combative or competitive. I was putting those two words together, obviously. So you can engage people in a way that's life-giving versus falling prey to the way that the world engages in each of those mountains. So I bless you guys, and I'm super excited to hear from you. Any struggles as well as victories that you're having on your mountain?